accurate, clear, and I think does a good job. Wow. But you missed the heart of the story. Why was none of that shown? I think there's a narrative being told here. My name is Levi Browdy. I'm the Executive Director for the Falun Dafa Information Center. I'm also the father of 2 Shen Yun dancers. Today, we'll walk through a recent CBS Sunday Morning segment on Shen Yun, an American company facing an unprecedented attack by Beijing to sabotage its operations and destroy its reputation right here on U.S. soil. Hello, folks. Yesterday, CBS Sunday Morning ran a segment about Shen Yun Performing Arts. My nonprofit, the Falun Dafa Information Center, has published several studies over the last few years looking at the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP's, transnational repression against the Falun Gong diaspora, which includes companies and organizations that have been started or run by Falun Gong practitioners. Principally among them is Shen Yun Performing Arts. So we're going to take a look at this segment. It's about 10 minutes long. I'll go through and offer you my thoughts. What they get right? What they get wrong? Is there anything glaring that's missing or should have been told to the viewers that wasn't? We'll do a deep dive on this and take a look and see how they did. All right?
For 20 seasons now, the traveling stage show Shen Yun has offered audiences a glimpse of what it calls China before communism.
That's true.
Chances are you've seen the ads. But there are questions about what goes on behind the curtain. Lisa Ling explains.
Okay, looks good.
Deep in the woods of New York, behind guarded gates, lies a vision of ancient China reborn. What is this place?
It's another world, and for us, it's like a sanctuary.
This private sanctuary is Dragon Springs, 400 acres where faith and art share the same stage. It is the creative center of Shen Yun, the epic stage production of Chinese history, legends, and politics.
Okay, I'll pause right there. So far, excellent. The campus is absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. I think they captured that fairly well. It does feature some of the most authentic Tang Dynasty-style Buddhist temple grounds in the world. It's an absolutely exquisite place. It is nestled sort of in the rolling hills of the Hudson Valley there. So I think all that was right. It is the training center, among other things. It is this training center for Shen Yun Performing Arts. It's also home to Feitian Academy and Feitian College. They might get into that. So far, this intro, accurate, clear, and I think does a good job.
We are putting on stage the tyranny of the CCP.
Ying Chen is a vice president and conductor with Shen Yun, and the CCP is the Chinese Communist Party. It calls the group behind the show an evil cult.
Okay, so let's stop right there. It was not always like that, and I think the history matters here. Falun Gong, the Buddhist-based spiritual practice, was first taught to the public in 1992. During the 90s, it became immensely popular. Up to 100 million people were practicing. That's 1 out of every 13 people in China. It was widely praised all around society. Even the Chinese government, state-run media, was saying how wonderful Falun Gong is for health, for what they call moral rectitude, just a phenomenal thing for society. And again, state-run media in a communist country is even saying that. And that was echoed throughout the whole country. It became too popular, so popular that the leader of the Communist Party said, oh, there's far more people doing this than there are members of the Communist Party, eradicate this group. Only then did the propaganda engine start running, and they said, okay, we need to make an excuse of why we're doing this, let's call them a cult. It was not always like that. So important footnote to what they said there.
Known as Falun Gong, it's a spiritual movement rooted in Buddhism.
Use the rotation of the Falun to rectify all abnormal conditions of the human body.
That's founder Li Hongzhi demonstrating Falun Gong's meditation exercises. He started teaching the practice in 1992. Falun Gong spread quickly throughout China, and Beijing responded.
China today banned a popular religious group that's been challenging communist rule.
The government now...
Okay, again, Very well done. The one thing I think that was Dan Rather at the end there, where talking about China banning Falun Gong, that's really not how it happened. Again, what do you mean by China? The government, the people, what have you? It was really the Communist Party leader at that time, Jiang Zemin, who unilaterally ordered that Falun Gong be eradicated. And there was a huge power struggle, actually, in the summer of 1999, because most of his lieutenants, people throughout China, Falun Gong back then was widely beloved and known throughout the country. And so there was a big power struggle there. But unfortunately, the top leader at the time, Jiang Zemin, was the one who wanted this persecution, and he's the one who pushed it through. So, but generally, very good job on setting the historical and cultural context for Shen Yun, Dragon Springs, and so on. So, well done.
Considers Falun Gong its public enemy number one.
Ying Shen says practitioners were imprisoned and tortured, including her own family.
My mom and my brother was sent to a labor camp, and he endured 18 months of agony, and his survival was a fragile miracle. He was literally tortured every single day.
Nice job on talking about the persecution, pulling out a couple of stories. It is widely documented on the scope and the scale of what is happening to Falun Gong in China over the last 25 years. Millions detained, rampant torture, death by torture, forced organ harvesting, the crime of holding prisoners of conscience, primarily Falun Gong people, screening them for blood type and these kinds of things to determine an organ match, and then killing them to extract their organ and give that to another person in an organ transplantation operation. The China tribunal that was in London from 2018, 2019, thereabouts, found, did a whole exhaustive study over a year and found that there were upwards of 30,000 or more people being killed per year in forced organ harvesting. That crime alone. Every year there's been documentation by the State Department, our Congress have passed multiple resolutions, Freedom House, Amnesty International, all these major human rights organizations, the UN, year after year after year, have documented it clearly what's happening to Falun Gong. There was a journalist for the Wall Street Journal that won the Pulitzer Prize back in 2001 for putting on the front page of an American paper for the first time that indeed Falun Gong are being tortured to death for their faith in China, across China. So this is a very well documented persecution. So to limit it just on what this one person says, I think is missing a much bigger picture and a much more well-documented atrocity. And I think any reporting about what's happening to Falun Gong over the last 25 years really should pull that in so people understand not only is this real, not only is pretty much every credible entity that looks at human rights in China saying that this is real, the scope and scale is enormous. Tens of millions of people are caught up in this persecution.
Founder Li Hongzhi settled in the U.S. and in 2006 launched Shen Yun. It would ask much of his followers.
Okay. Yes, Shen Yun was founded in 2006 by the founder of Falun Gong and many Falun Gong practitioners. But this whole statement of it would ask much of his followers. The Falun Gong community has had friends and family and loved ones being tortured and put in prison and dying for 25 years now. Back then, that persecution was raging for 7 years. Shen Yun was an opportunity because the media was being silent, because Western governments really weren't doing a whole lot, and meanwhile, people are being tortured and killed in China. So Shen Yun was an opportunity to not only show what Chinese culture looked like before the communists came in and tried to destroy it, but to tell the story of what was happening to Falun Gong. That's part of the China story. That's part of Chinese culture. Falun Gong is probably the most authentic extension of Chinese culture in modern China. And to tell that story, to tell the tyranny of the CCP, to show the heroism of Falun Gong and their supporters standing up peacefully to that tyranny. This was an opportunity to do that on the world stage. That's what motivated us. Not because the Falun Gong founder would ask much of us. You missed the heart of the story with these kind of statements.
Including Jeff's son, and Ashley Cheng.
Li Hongzhi made it quite clear that Shen Yun was the highest form of how practitioners can support the movement. The entire community I grew up in was very proud of me. They thought it was a great honor to live with Li Hongzhi in that compound.
This is very much in line with Beijing's attempt to paint Falun Gong as a cult and the founder as a cult leader. And this is just nonsense. I would never be proud to send my son to a compound to live with the founder of Falun Gong. I would have no interest in that. What I'm interested in is, what is the school like? Does it give a good education? Does it help build the character of the students? Does it give them a pathway to do something amazing? And in the cases of my boys, the answer is a resounding yes. And that's why we sent them there. This is a complete mischaracterization of why we do what we do and what we really believe. Again, I can't speak to their situation, the relationship that they may or may not have with their parents and what their parents might be thinking. This is not representative of the Falun Gong community.
In that compound.
As if like I made it to Harvard.
He was 15. She was 13. Nearly 9,000 miles from home.
Okay, is that the wording and tone you would use if they were sent to Deerfield Academy? That would still be 9,000 miles away. They would still be 15 and 13. Would it be this ominous? I think there's a narrative being told here.
Everything was very isolated, and our main job is to dance.
What were you told about having...
Okay, so the framing here is let's talk about a few things. Now, first of all, what exactly is at Dragon Springs aside from Shen Yun? There's Fei Tian Academy of the Arts and Fei Tian College. These are schools that are registered with the state of New York. In the case of the academy, it is a religious boarding school registered with the state of New York. It provides a standard New York curriculum. Every student there is on full scholarship. Room and board is for free. And they do very well on if you look at over, for SAT scores, for example, they routinely test well above state and national averages. So that there is a school there for young people who have an affinity for or an inclination to dance or play music or do stage production. They're also getting a standard New York education while they're there. There is also a college, which again is religious affiliated. It is an accredited college by NECI, the same organization that accredits Yale, Harvard, and other universities here in the Northeast of the United States. And there you can get both undergraduate and master's degrees in the performing arts space, dance, music, production, things of that nature. And so some of the framing and the tone here is their parents sent them. They're at a boarding school, like many boarding schools all around the world. That's very, very normal. And so some of the way they talk about this, I think, is disingenuous or makes it sound more unusual than it truly is. My father went to Deerfield. That was a boarding school. He left home at 13, and that's what he did. So there was a couple other things that were referenced, but I just wanted to sort of set clear what exactly are they talking about here. They weren't sent to Shen Yun. They're going to Fei Tian Academy of Arts, which is a boarding school in New York.
Any contact with the world outside of Dragon Springs?
If our parents asked any questions, we had to tell them that we were happy that master, which is Li Hongzhi, was taking great care of us.
Okay, so this whole, I've heard this narrative several times before, this isolation thing. I mean, first of all, it is in the rolling hills of Orange County, New York, which is fairly rural. But, okay, so are countless other schools around the world. And the idea that they're isolated, that they can't talk to their parents or text. Look, my boys went to Fei Tian Academy of Arts. They are now in Fei Tian College. Not only do they have a phone, the school issued it to them so that they can call and text me whenever they want or whoever they want to call and text whenever they want. So this idea that they're isolated and that somehow is just not true. And so I think it's trying to spin around this narrative that's going after Dragon Springs and Shen Yun, that really originated from Beijing in terms of trying to malign anything related to Falun Gong. And that's part of a larger campaign. We'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to address sort of this so-called isolation idea.
The reality, Sun and Cheng claim, was they were part of a group of child laborers living in constant fear.
I was in survival mode. It's about not exceeding 100 pounds every day. It's about following the footsteps of the person in front of me so I don't get yelled out of line.
Okay. Again, I empathize if they've gone through something traumatic. But when we're trying to get into the details, what was the trauma? Well, sounds like she had to watch her weight and she had to stay in line in formation when she's in the dance class. That's what dance is about. The weight thing, is not just about, you do need to look a certain way on stage. So weight is important, but it's not just about that. It's also about your health. Chinese dance, particularly classical Chinese dance, is a lot of jumping and tumbling techniques. You're landing hard, sometimes knees and ankles and so forth. If you've got weight issues, that's really bad on your whole body, particularly your joints, because that's what you're landing on. You've got to keep at a healthy weight. So the idea that, keeping at a healthy weight and she has to stay in formation is the substance of why this was a traumatic experience. Again, I don't know her specifics of her situation, but that is not anything remotely approaching whatever they're alleging in the lawsuit, or the fact that there's some significantly wrong with Shen Yun. It's called elite dance. That's what it is. So I don't see anything incriminating or strange here. The only thing that's strange is that they're trying to make it sound strange, but this is all very normal. The fact that Jeff says he doesn't have anybody to talk to, not sure about that. That is not the experience of my boys. Lots of people to talk to, including me, but around, my boys have often talked about some of the mentors there and some of the people there that have made not only a great example that they could follow, but someone that they can share and talk to about when they're going through different things. My youngest son this past summer was having some Achilles trouble, so he's seen the doctor about that, but he's also talking to some of the senior dancers, and that had been very helpful about how they treated injuries and how they sort of got through it. And so that's not our experience. Not sure why Jeff feels that way, but there you go.
The body, they say, would bear its own.
2 kids kind of pushed my legs open in the side split, and it was the most amount of pain I ever experienced, ever. I had internal bleeding. My entire inside of my legs, both legs, was purple, but every day I still had to do the same thing.
My shoulder was...
I'm not a dancer, but again, my boys are dancing. I'm very familiar with them. I'm very close to a lot of their friends there. One of the first things that you need to do when you go to an elite dance school, and this is not just Shen Yun, this is ballet, this is all kinds of dance schools, is you have to get flexible. And so that means when you go in, you're opening your legs up. It is very painful. And you go through that process until, as my sons have described it for me many, many times, you limber up. And so that you can do a full 180 split and it doesn't hurt anymore. It's feels very normal. I've seen senior dancers fall asleep in that posture, getting a little bit of stretch in and an afternoon nap at the same time. And so this is a normal process. It is painful. Everybody goes through it. So I don't know what he's talking about, internal bleeding or things like that. I have no idea what his situation was, but this idea to highlight opening up your legs and stretching when you're starting your training at an elite dance institute as a major problem, I find to be very, very strange. What's also strange is when, I don't know Jeff. I know many of the dancers that used to dance with him. It is something that happens at the beginning of your training, because after, I don't know, maybe it's several months or a year, when your legs are flexible and you're open, it no longer hurts. And you go on and you become a dancer. And from what I understand, that was indeed that after that period, that first period of getting flexible, Jeff danced for many, many years. I think was even a principal dancer at some point. And so this would be an issue that only came up there at the beginning. So the fact that he's holding that up as this, traumatic event is strange. So let's see what Ashley has to say.
Stretched for an abnormal amount of time once, and I lost all feeling in it. So I had issues from showering to going to the bathroom.
Did you ever tell your instructors about your injuries?
Yeah, I did. And I was faced with the eye roll. I have not had or seen a single pill of medicine during my entire duration.
Okay, again, I don't know Ashley. I can't speak to her experience. That's not the experience of my sons and the dancers around them, including the ladies that are in their class. I know what to say. I know dancers that have gotten MRIs, dancers that have ruptured their Achilles and got surgery, dancers who had knee problems, had multiple surgeries, dance instructors there that have taken them to the doctor and said, you should check this out, even when the dancer's like, nah, I'm okay, I can keep going. So I have no idea what she's talking about. It doesn't line up with our experience at all. Doesn't line up with my boys or their friends' experience.
Cheng are part of a growing group of former dancers contending that medical care was discouraged, a belief they say is rooted in Falun Gong teachings.
Any injury that you have, if you mention that you want to go to the hospital or if you wanted help, it will be denied, and it will be very quickly associated to you got injured because you disobeyed Li Hongji.
It is your fault.
It is your fault.
Okay. Look, again, empathy for these folks. Clearly, they went through something painful, or they appear to have gone through something painful. I have never heard that you got hurt because you disobeyed the founder of Falun Gong. That's just ridiculous. I've never even heard that. And again, our experiences, I know I can rattle a list of at least 20 dancers that have gotten injured or had some sort of difficulty, which is very common in an elite dance company, and got it taken care of. Whether it's just sort of on the one end of the spectrum, some ice and acupuncture, on the other end of the spectrum, surgery, sometimes multiple surgeries. So this is not our experience. The fact that they're trying to tie this back to, they're not just saying really that Shen Yun doesn't allow its dancers medical treatment, which would be bizarre. That's not the way to run a dance company. If you want people on stage and being productive, you need to make sure they're taken care of. They're tying it back to the beliefs of Falun Gong, and this is, I think, one of the key red flags, is they're trying to pin this on Falun Gong. And again, this is one of the things to point out is, for the last 2 years, when all these accusations were made to the media, when the lawsuits were brought forth, this was at the exact same time that Beijing had escalated a campaign to go after Shen Yun and Falun Gong, malign them and sabotage them outside China. And they said exactly how they were going to do it. They were going to use lawsuits. They were going to use the media. And indeed, that's kind of what we're seeing here. So the fact that they're trying to tie this back to Falun Gong and blame it on the teachings of Falun Gong indicates at least alignment with what Beijing has been trying to do these last few years. And that's a huge red flag.
In 2015, they were kicked out of Shen Yun. Last spring,
They just glossed that over. That's not entirely accurate. From what I understand, I've talked to people at the school. Jeff had violated codes of conduct in a pretty serious way multiple times, nothing to do with the accusations he's making, and eventually was kicked out after giving multiple chances, and it was pretty serious. Ashley was simply not admitted to the college because there are very, very high artistic standards, and I guess she didn't quite reach that level. So to brush that off as though they were kicked out, well, why? And that, anyway, that wasn't quite accurate, and I think it's telling to understand what really happened there. Okay.
Sued one of 2 federal lawsuits against the performance group alleging forced labor. Jeff, I can see the emotion in your face. I wonder what it's like to relive this right now.
Every time I think about what happened to me, and it kind of breaks me apart, and nobody deserves this. I mean, we're all kids, we wanted to impress our parents. We wanted to do what we thought was right.
So clearly the reporter is trying to elicit an emotional response from Jeff. He seems having trouble kind of articulating it or saying what he feels. And if you notice, there was about 3 or 4 cuts just to piece together his answer there, which is a little strange. Here's what's interesting. We'll go through the rest of this episode. I wonder if this reporter makes an equal attempt to really bring out and understand the emotions of the Shen Yun performers. Again, these are people who their faith has been horribly persecuted in China. Many of them have had family members imprisoned, tortured, or killed. They themselves have been persecuted in China. They've come and built this company from nothing up into what it is. Now you've got members of the American press that seem to be going after them and mischaracterizing who they are and what they believe, very much in line with the propaganda coming out of Beijing. Let's see if she makes an attempt to see what that's like, what that has been, what the emotions are there. Because she's really clearly making an attempt here to see what Jeff is really feeling.
Shen Yun about these allegations, and they invited us into Dragon Springs. It's totally quiet in here. What's happening right now? Spokeswoman Ying Chen showed us around.
It's a little bit like praying. We settle down our minds and try to purge distracting thoughts and just stay really focused.
I noticed that the men and women are sitting on opposite sides.
Mm-hmm. We're very conservative values in the school, so they usually keep them separate.
You've never allowed outside media to come into Dragon Springs until today. Why have you agreed?
Okay, I just want to take note of something there. Full disclosure, I was there on campus when CBS came. They had originally were talking to Ying Chen for Shen Yun. They were talking to me regarding Falun Gong issues. So I joined them on campus for the tour. They were actually there for 2 full days, 2 separate days. Let's see what they show about their visit. Now, they decided to lead with a specific moment in time, which was certainly not characteristic of the environment and sort of the broader what it's like to be there on campus. And I just want to highlight that now, and let's see how much they rounded out with what it's actually like on campus. But it was interesting that they started with that moment, which was sort of like a prayer moment that happens in the middle of the day for 15 minutes. So let's see where they go with this.
To allow us to come in.
I think part of it is because they talk about a compound. Does it look like a compound? I think it's true that we...
Okay, do you see that? That's also interesting. She's saying, look, people say this is a compound. It's not. Does this look like a compound? And then the editor cuts to Lisa, the reporter, nodding her head yes, when clearly the point is, no, this is obviously not a compound. Do you see a big wall anywhere? That's a strange edit to show the reporter affirming that rhetorical question.
This is a place that provides top-level dance training, and also it's a faith-based community.
The plaintiffs allege that while here, they were not allowed to get the medical attention they may have needed.
I cannot speak to what they went through, but I just find it very shocking and very different from the practice here and our policies here.
So on this medical question, it's not just, I think what Ying just said there. I mean, medical doctors have come forward and spoken about how they treat the injuries of Shen Yun performers. There are an abundance of medical records. There are scores of Shen Yun performers who have come forward and said, this is the kind of injury I had, this is the treatment I've been given. And so, I'm sorry, the facts they're important. They matter in this, when it comes to this allegation, and they make it very clear. Standard, even high-quality medical attention is the norm at Shen Yun. Many of the performers who need it, get it. You can't argue with those facts, no matter how sort of emotional you package it. It is what it is. That's reality.
Do you believe the Chinese government is behind these lawsuits?
These lawsuits emerged at a time when Beijing escalated its global campaign against Shen Yun. It's really hard to see it as a mere coincidence.
And just this month, the Chinese embassy called Shen Yun a cult's propaganda, using culture as a cover to deliver indoctrination.
Okay, so let's be clear what they're talking about here. My organization has, over the last couple of years, published a few reports where we did a deep dive on this. there have been over 200 incidents in at least 40 countries where the Chinese regime, usually the ambassador himself or herself or one of the people at the consulate, is involved with trying to sabotage or silence Shen Yun in their country. And that ranges from high-level diplomats in all these countries going after theater managers, local government officials, threatening them, putting pressure on them to not have Shen Yun performances, all the way to just outright thuggery. Vehicles being sabotaged, tires being slashed, brakes systems being sabotaged on Shen Yun vehicles, such to the point where, for the last 10 years at least, they've had to have 24/7 security on their buses anywhere they go, anywhere in the world. And then there's the whole range of bomb threats and death threats that are being sent not only to Shen Yun headquarters, to a lot of the theaters where Shen Yun's perform, to even government officials who are supportive of Shen Yun. Some of those threats were traced back to China by the Taiwanese authorities. So we know where the threats are coming from. All this is what Shen Yun has been dealing with for the past 20 years, since the day they started operations. Now, the last 2 years has been particularly intense. We now know, and we've done a whole study on this, I'll put a link down below, from Chinese experts, those who have connections directly to high-level Chinese officials, that in the last 2 years they've recognized a reality. And that reality is, despite their attempts to silence Shen Yun, to sabotage them, to malign the Falun Gong community, Shen Yun in that time has become the fastest-growing performing arts company in American history. Clearly, Beijing's efforts have failed. And so, this has not been lost on Beijing. So for the last 2 years, they have undergone a dramatic escalation of this campaign to go after Shen Yun in the U.S. legal system and to bait U.S. media to take the narrative that Beijing has been spouting about Falun Gong for the last quarter century and repackage that in a way that U.S. media would bite and do stories that align with that propaganda to try and paint Falun Gong as weird, as a dangerous group. We know that they said they were going to do it 2 years ago, and that's exactly what we've been seeing. So this part of the episode, that Ying was talking about, and this letter from the embassy here, I mean, just so you know what this example is, Shen Yun performed in Washington, D.C. 3 weeks ago. And so what did the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. do? It took this whole letter with all kinds of nasty propaganda, and it sent it out to all the media in Washington, D.C., including bureau chiefs, to the major newspapers, all that. So that's what the embassy is doing in Washington, D.C., and this is just a small sampling. So this is really what they're talking about, and this is what Shen Yun has been facing for the last 20 years.
CCP has been trying to sabotage us since day one. We've got death threats, bomb threats, and this tactic that they're using now is very similar to what they're using to persecute Falun Gong.
Shen Yun company members Regina Dong, Shindy Kai, and Peter Huang were also sent as teenagers to Dragon Springs. Do you feel like your parents...
Okay. Look, I mean, these are small things, but I think they matter. It sounds like the parents are just sort of like, oh, I'm just going to ship you up there because that's what I want. These are boarding schools that have entrance requirements. You have to test into them. If you're a musician, you got to be at a certain level. If you're a dancer, you have to have certain qualifications. Many people, including my eldest son, tried and failed, and they had to decide if this is something they really want to do, put the work in, and then reapply so that they would be accepted. Even Jeff and Ashley had auditioned several times before they actually got in. This is a boarding school that offers elite training in dance, music, and stage production, and it's something you have to apply for, and you have to meet the requirements for, and you have to be accepted for. So to brush that off as, oh, their parents sent them there, is right exactly aligned with the narrative that Beijing has been pushing. They've been trying to convince the world for 25 years that Falun Gong is a cult, and now they see an opportunity to do this by taking that label and affixing it to Dragon Springs, the school's Shen Yun. And wittingly or not, I think CBS is walking right into the trap in terms of how they're framing this and how they're talking about it. And that can't be accidental. Again, these are professionals. They choose their words carefully. They choose their edits carefully, I would assume. So this is very intentional, and that's a little bit of a red flag.
Pressured you in any way to come here?
Not at all. Now, if they came and tried to drive me away, I wouldn't go.
Do you feel like you have had access to the proper medical attention that you needed?
Yes, for sure. When I was having pain in my Achilles a few years back, my company manager. She gave me the contact to our doctor. Had an MRI done. He said, okay, you have this. You should do blah, 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 blah.
Shindy, you said to me earlier that you never get sick. Do you think that your faith has helped you to not get sick?
I actually do think so, because I almost find it strange sometimes. I'm like, usually I'm supposed to come down with like a flu, but never. And I think a lot of it has to do with the energy.
For Jeff's son and Ashley Chang.
Okay, again, a subtle thing there, but I think it's worth noting. So, okay, you saw Peter's response. The Peter is a principal dancer here. First of all, it looks like he's not going to leave even if his parents come and get him. But then they pivot to Shindy, who's another dancer here, and they're sort of like trying to. They ask her, "Oh, you never get sick," like it's some sort of fantastical faith thing. I think that's the implication. Again, I don't think that's accidental. There is an enormous body of knowledge and study that has been done on the effects, the healthy benefits of meditation, Buddhist-style meditation, the preventative medicine aspects of living a clean lifestyle. All this is very much a part of why Shindy, I've heard her story, doesn't get sick. And that's very, very normal for someone living a very healthy lifestyle. So to just kind of leave it like that, like, oh, you just magically don't get sick. Again, I think it's intentional. And I think it's not, it is, again, wittingly or not, lining up to this whole idea that, these people are weird, they have a strange faith, that kind of thing. So, don't really appreciate the way that edit was done. And actually, again, I've heard Shindy's story. It's much more grounded and comprehensive in what she describes there than what they edited here.
They returned to New Zealand and no longer practice Falun Gong. The Falun Gong. Okay,
so again, missed a whole lot of detail there. Jeff was kicked out. Ashley didn't make the requirements for, or was not accepted into the college. They left and for quite some time continued to volunteer for Falun Gong and Shen Yun related matters, and that was about 10 years ago. And here we are 10 years later. Now they're bringing these lawsuits. They're making these allegations to the media. So just to make clear the detail that they didn't provide there.
I'll describe you as disgruntled performers. How do you respond to that?
I have a response for this. Yes, we are disgruntled. What happened to us was not our fault. We were children, and we've been living with the shame, and I don't want to live with it for the rest of my life.
Okay, the first thing I think about when I hear this is, as a parent, my heart's kind of breaking for these two. No matter how they got in the situation, no matter what really happened to them or what it is, I know a lot of families maybe wrestle with this. Sometimes kids, parents will send their kids to a Catholic school and the kids don't want to go, or other kind of institutions, a military institution, they don't want to go. Personally, for me, I would never send my boys to a school if they absolutely did not want to go. That would be my decision. But then take that out on Shen Yun and do it in a way that's very much in line with a regime trying to totally sabotage and malign this group is a problem. Now, I just want to point out, I've actually accidentally stopped, and here you have one of their dancers in a split, and this is what I'm talking about. Clearly this is a veteran dancer who's been dancing for a long time. He's just sitting on the floor, completely opened up. This is not a painful thing. It's something that is only painful at the very beginning of your serious dance training.
New York's Department of Labor is now looking into Shen Yun's working conditions and child labor practices.
Okay, I think that's really misleading to just say that sentence by itself and then move on, which I think they do. The New York State Department of Labor is now looking into the working conditions and labor practices at Shen Yun. Okay. That is not at all representative of what the relationship is between the Department of Labor and Shen Yun. I've talked to several people who are working on these issues at Shen Yun. They're in regular contact with the Department of Labor. And in fact, in the state of New York, when you do have some performers that are under the age 18, student performers, you have to apply for a permit and send in the application and get a permit for each of those individuals, which Shen Yun does. So there's very much a working relationship between the Department of Labor and Shen Yun. But the way they state it here, it sounds ominous and vague, and that is wholly misleading. I think it's also important to understand the role of minors when it comes to Shen Yun, because that's the theme that's going all through this thing. That certainly came to the head here. And we got to get a couple of facts straight. First of all, Shen Yun is a professional performing arts company. 85% of its touring companies are adults. What makes Shen Yun special is it has a relationship with Feitian Academy and Feitian College, so that student performers that are very good can apply to be part of a practicum program. This is part of a New York State approved curriculum. This practicum program, if they're good enough, can, during their off season, meaning they finish the 2 semesters that they have on campus and they're finished their academic work, but their off season, which would normally be the summer break for most schools, if they're good enough, they can apply for and join the Shen Yun tour as part of a practicum program. But this is, the idea, again, coming back to this idea of child laborers, the numbers just do not support that. Again, 85% are adults. The talented young people that can reach the artistic level do have a chance to do that, but it's part of a practicum program. They get credit for it. Everything is paid for. And again, in the state of New York, there's a permit that allows them to do that, which Shen Yun applies for and indeed gets each year. So this segment, this whole idea that Shen Yun relies heavily on minors is nonsense. This particular segment about the New York Department of Labor, I think, was misleading.
Thank you. Just as the show's 20th season goes on tour, each year is a new show. But the final scene is always the same. A Chinese city on the edge of destruction until the Deus Ex Machina, a mystical being resembling Falun Gong founder Li Hongzhi, descends from the heavens to save the world.
A Shen Yun performance has about 20 pieces, and during the course of the performance, these pieces go throughout lots of different periods of China, different dynasties, different eras. There are stories of great Taoist masters that teach disciples, that fly off into the sky, that have these tremendous powers. There are Buddhist stories, whether from Journey to the West or Buddhist stories more broadly. There are all kinds of fantastical and interesting myths and legends that are told during the course of a show. So this piece that they're talking about, that this Buddhist-like figure that comes back that resembles the Falun Gong founder, again, they're trying to tie into, I would speculate, some sort of cult leader, cult narrative. And they're picking things out to try and fit that narrative. Again, there are a lot of mystical things that you see throughout the show. How come they don't complain about the Taoist master that's in the show, or the Buddhist master, or these other sort of elements of Chinese culture that are very mystical in their portrayal? They just pick on this one. That's a red flag. That's a red flag.
But for now, the story of Shen Yun seems neither so simple, nor perhaps so sacred.
Wow. Okay, so CBS Sunday Morning has passed judgment on Shen Yun as not so sacred. Based on what? Based on the allegations of a couple people that fly in the face of the statements from hundreds and hundreds of current and former Shen Yun performers that say these kind of allegations are gross distortions of their life, their work, and their faith. So I want to go back to a few things that I made a note or highlighted the fact that they were brought into the campus. They spent 2 full days there. What's interesting here is when they were there, they walked throughout the academy and they saw students going in and out of hallways, in and out of classrooms. They looked at the full curriculum that was posted on the wall and the different history and science and different types of academic classes, writing, Chinese writing, English literature, all the classes there. They saw that. They filmed all that. Kids doing their homework on the computer banks there. They saw all that. We took them into dance rehearsals so they could see not only how they put together a show, but the level of camaraderie, which is quite interesting at Shen Yun. How the team really comes first, and how you see that in how dances are put together and how the artists interact with each other. We went in and we saw that. They shot all that. I mean, I remember at lunchtime, we were all sitting there in the student center, and there was this moment actually when the CBS reporters looked up and they looked around and they remarked to us how amazing it was that you didn't see everybody with their nose in the phone, which is what they see on most campuses. They looked around and nobody was doing that. Everybody was sort of interacting with the people that they were with. There was a lot of laughter and discussion, and it was a very bustling student center, and they made a point to recognize that that was the culture here. And in many ways, years and years and years ahead of most schools in the United States, because just in the last year, you can see even in California, New York, other states, and now enacting these laws to not have smartphones in the classroom or even in school at all, because they're finally catching up with the idea that this is very damaging for the education of kids, for their social skills, their development, all kinds of things. And here they were seeing this is what we've been doing since our inception, and it's going very well, and we were right. So they saw all this. This is and much, much more. And yet, if you look at the totality of what they showed the viewer in terms of what life is like at Dragon Springs, what did you see? You saw a little segment of this prayer type thing that we do for 15 minutes in the middle of the day, and that was it. Nothing about how the students are getting educated, nothing about what their lives look like in the classroom, in the dance rehearsal hall, during lunch, in the bakery, in the student center, all these things that they saw, none of that was shown, because what would that tell you? That would show you, wow, this isn't actually a very vibrant place where you have a lot of kids that are interacting in a very healthy manner, that enjoy their time here immensely. That's what the picture you would see. Why was none of that shown? You just saw this little segment of our prayer moment in the middle of the day. And most people are going to look at that. It's not terribly relatable. And I understand most schools don't have a prayer moment in the middle of the day. I got to say, when you line this up with everything else they did, the little edits they did, the little comments they make, especially the comment at the end that were not so sacred, this doesn't look like an objective piece to help viewers really understand what Shen Yun is, what life like is at Dragon Springs. And that's disconcerting. There's another aspect to this segment that I find a little bit disturbing. And that is this. These reporters came into Shen Yun and they asked tough questions, as they should. That's what good journalism should do. They learned about what these allegations were. They talked to Ying Chen. They had her answer those questions. They talked to the performers, had her answer those questions. All that's good. Totally respect that. They did not challenge Jeff and Ashley at all. There are significant red flags to the stories that they're telling and why they might be telling them now. And the reporters knew that. Again, I don't know these two individuals. If they did indeed go through something traumatic, I empathize with that. But that doesn't change the fact that there are some real red flags to what they are saying and when they're saying it, and perhaps why they're saying it. Again, most of what I've heard in terms of the physical trauma that they talked about sounds like a certain framing of standard elite dance training. And it's very difficult. Most of the people I know, my sons included, it was tough, but they got through it, and they had a lot of support, both from their fellow dancers and their dance instructors. And it is what it is. But here's what's sort of strange. Again, they left under certain circumstances. Jeff was kicked out. Ashley was not admitted to the college. Then they continued volunteering for Falun Gong Shen-related organizations for a while when they're back at home. 10 years go by. 10 years, about. Then they decide, I'm going to go to the media and make these accusations. I'm going to follow this lawsuit. What's also a red flag is it wasn't just 10 years. It was after they had made, and by their own admission, they admit this openly in interviews they've published online. They made contact with Beijing Dance Academy, which, despite its benign-sounding name, is a Chinese government-run entity that has a clear political agenda and is targeting Shen Yun and has in the past. That is well known. That is well documented. Any real Falun Gong practitioner is in grave danger going back to China, let alone trying to connect with Beijing Dance Academy and have a working relationship there. They did. And it was shortly after they did that they now make these allegations, make these lawsuits, filed this lawsuit. So what's going on here? The truth is, I don't know. Again, the opening few minutes were fair. They were accurate. They provided the right historical and cultural context. But most of the rest of it was oddly framed to support the accusations of Jeff and Ashley. Jeff and Ashley were not asked tough questions. Shen Yun performers were. The vibrant, wonderful education environment and training environment of Dragon Springs, despite being here for 2 full days, was not represented at all. There were a number of edits and commentaries that seemed to dovetail with the narrative that Beijing has been trying to put out about Falun Gong and Shen Yun. And so that's disturbing, that's how they pursued this piece. Anyway, that's my assessment. I hope it was helpful. Thanks very much.